My children dropped me off at Golden Sunset Retirement Home on a Tuesday. It was raining. How fitting for such a day. Diane, my daughter, handled the paperwork with the same efficiency she brought to her banking career, while Richard, my architect's son, kept checking his watch as if he had somewhere more important to be. "It's for the best, Mom," Diane said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You'll have medical care around the clock. There will be people your own age here," Richard added, with that persuasive smile he'd perfected since childhood. "You won't be alone anymore." I looked around the sterile room they'd assigned me. White walls, a narrow bed, a small window overlooking the parking lot. Nothing like the home Howard and I had built together, where I'd lived for 47 years. The home they couldn't wait to sell. "When will you visit?" I asked, carefully keeping my voice neutral. "As soon as things settle down at work," Diane promised, already scrolling through emails on her phone. "We'll come next weekend," Richard said, though his wife Victoria remained in the car, not even bothering to help settle me in. I nodded and began unpacking my small suitcase. I'd brought only essentials, some clothes, Howard's pocket watch, a few cherished books. They seemed surprised I hadn't packed more, but what was the point? I knew what this was, storage for an inconvenient old woman while they divided the spoils of my life. "Do you need anything else, Mom?" Richard asked, clearly eager to leave. "No," I replied simply. "I'm fine." They seemed almost disappointed by my lack of protest. Perhaps they'd expected tears, accusations, something to justify what they were doing. Instead, I gave them a small smile and a wave as they left, promising to call that evening. They didn't call that night, or the next. A week passed, then a month. Visits were postponed, video calls rescheduled, then canceled. I wasn't surprised. At 75, I'd lived long enough to recognize when I was being discarded. What my children didn't know was that I had always been more than just Howard's wife, or Richard and Diane's mother. Before I was either of those things, I was Beatrice Warner, professor of applied mathematics at Arizona State. I specialized in probability theory and statistical analysis. I could calculate odds, identify patterns, and formulate strategies that most people never saw coming. Howard understood this about me. It was one of the reasons he fell in love with me. My mind was always working, always 3 steps ahead. He was the daring entrepreneur, but I was the careful planner who helped him avoid pitfalls that would have bankrupted a less cautious businessman. As the weeks at Golden Sunset turned into months, I observed everything. The overworked staff, the cost-cutting measures disguised as efficiency, the forgotten residents whose children rarely visited. I became invisible, as old women often do. A convenient state that allows one to observe without being observed in return. 6 months after my arrival, I was having tea with Eleanor, a former bank executive whose children had also stored her here, when an orderly delivered my mail. Among the usual solicitations and insurance notices was a letter addressed in elegant handwriting I recognized immediately. "Excuse me," I told Eleanor, taking the letter back to my room. Seated on my bed, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a card with Howard's law firm's letterhead and a simple message. "My dearest Beatrice, if you're reading this, the contingency we discussed has come to pass. The trust has been activated as of yesterday. Marcus Williams will contact you within the week. Remember our promise to each other. Dignity always. All my love, Howard." I pressed the card to my heart, tears filling my eyes for the first time since I'd arrived at Golden Sunset. Not tears of sadness, but of vindication. Howard had known. Of course he had known. We both had. 3 days later, Marcus Williams, Howard's longtime attorney, visited me. We sat in the small garden area, away from curious ears. "Mrs. Warner," he said formally, though we'd known each other for decades. "The conditions of the special trust have been met. As per Mr. Warner's instructions, you now have full access to the assets." He handed me a folder containing account information, passwords, and legal documents. "The current value is approximately $47 million. I nodded, unsurprised. Howard and I had set up this trust 30 years ago, a secret insurance policy against exactly the scenario that had unfolded. The terms were specific. The assets would remain dormant unless I was removed from my residence against my genuine wishes by the secondary beneficiaries, Diane and Richard. The moment they placed me in Golden Sunset to sell our home, they had unknowingly triggered the clause that disinherited them, and gave me complete control of a fortune they never knew existed. There's more, Marcus continued. Mr. Warner instructed me to inform you that the owner of Golden Sunset Retirement Home is looking to sell. The information is confidential, but they're asking $12 million. I smiled. Howard's foresight never ceased to amaze me. Even from beyond the grave, he was giving me the perfect opening move. Please begin the acquisition process immediately, I instructed. And Marcus, I'll need your expertise for several other matters as well. Over the next year and a half, I worked quietly, methodically. I renovated Golden Sunset, now renamed Warner Senior Living Community, transforming it from a storage facility for unwanted elderly into a dignified residence with quality care and engaging activities. I acquired 5 similar facilities across Arizona, implementing the same standards and creating a foundation to provide care for those who couldn't afford it. All the while, I received the occasional impersonal gift from my children, a television I rarely watched, a tablet I never opened. Their visits became increasingly infrequent, their excuses more elaborate. I made no complaints, biding my time. Then, exactly 2 years after they had left me at Golden Sunset, I instructed my assistant to make a call. Tell them there's an urgent situation involving their mother, I said. No details, just that they need to come immediately. The next day, I sat at the head of my boardroom table in a tailored navy suit, reviewing expansion plans with Marcus when my secretary announced their arrival. Diane entered first, her banker's composure faltering at the sight of me in this unexpected setting. Richard followed, with Victoria reluctantly trailing behind, her designer sunglasses still on despite being indoors. Mom? Diane's voice betrayed her shock. What's going on? We got a call about an emergency. I set down my reading glasses and smiled. Yes, I asked them to call. After 2 years, I needed to create an emergency to get my children to visit. Please, sit down. Their confusion as they took in my appearance, the executive office, and the gold nameplate reading, Beatrice Warner, CEO and owner, was almost comical. I imagine you have questions, I continued calmly. Let me save you some time. Yes, I now own this facility. Yes, I've completely transformed its operations. And yes, this was all funded with money you never knew existed. The next hour would change all our lives forever. But as I prepared to reveal just how thoroughly they had underestimated their elderly mother, I felt not triumph, but a calm certainty that justice, not vengeance, was about to be served. How is this possible? Richard finally managed, his architect's eye still taking in the transformed surroundings, the elegant office, the mahogany desk, the view of manicured gardens where there had once been patchy lawn. A fair question, I replied, opening the file folder Marcus had prepared. Your father and I were married for 47 years. Did you really think we didn't plan for every contingency? I slid a document across the desk. It was a copy of the trust agreement Howard and I had established 3 decades earlier. This is a special trust your father created in 1992. It contained shares in several companies he helped found early in his career, companies that grew quite substantially over time. The trust had specific activation parameters. Diane, always quick with numbers, scanned the document. Her banker's training made her zero in on the bottom line almost immediately. Her eyes widened. $47 million? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Currently, yes, I confirmed. When we established it, it was worth about $2 million. Your father had a good eye for emerging technologies. Victoria finally removed her sunglasses, her practiced socialite composure cracking. I don't understand. If you had this kind of money, why were you living in that old house? Why did Howard leave everything else to Richard and Diane in his will? I smiled patiently. The house wasn't old to us, Victoria. It was our home. As for the will you all knew about, that was real. But this trust was our insurance policy. I tapped a specific paragraph on the document. This clause stipulated that the trust would only become accessible to me under one specific condition. If I was, and I quote, removed from my residence against my genuine wishes by the secondary beneficiaries. Richard paled. You're saying Dad predicted we would put me in a retirement home to sell the house? Yes. I met his eyes directly. Howard calculated approximately a 70% probability that this would happen within 3 years of his death. He called it his insurance policy for Beatrice's dignity. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. The most ironic part, I continued, is that I would have willingly moved if you'd asked. The house was becoming difficult to maintain alone. But you didn't ask. You decided, as if I were a child or a piece of furniture to be relocated at your convenience. Diane, ever the pragmatist, was already calculating damage control. Mom, we truly believed this was best for you. The stairs, living alone at your age. Please, I interrupted, raising my hand. Let's not compound the situation with dishonesty. I overheard your conversation in the hospital cafeteria about how the property had appreciated, about the plans for the money, Richard's vacation home in the Hamptons, Diane's investment in that tech startup. They exchanged guilty glances, caught in the lie. But that's ancient history now, I said, straightening some papers on my desk. I've used the trust to buy this facility, renovate it completely, and acquire 5 similar establishments across Arizona. We're opening a 6th in Tucson next month. I gestured toward the window, where residents were enjoying the gardens, participating in art classes, or chatting in comfortable seating areas. Every resident here receives the dignity they deserve in their final years, something I initially was not afforded. Victoria, recovering her composure, switched tactics. Well, Beatrice, this is all very impressive. We're happy for your success, of course, though I'm not sure why you felt the need for this dramatic revelation. You could have simply called. I smiled. Like you called me, Victoria? Or visited, as promised? The emergency was merely a practical solution to a communication problem you created. Before Victoria could respond, I pressed the intercom. Marcus, would you bring in the second file, please? Marcus returned with a thick folder, which he placed before me before exiting discreetly. During my early months here, I had considerable free time, I explained, opening the folder. I began receiving strange financial documents addressed to me, bank correspondence, tax notifications for transactions I supposedly authorized. It was confusing at first, until I realized what was happening. I laid out several documents, turning them so my children and daughter-in-law could see. You didn't just sell my house. You forged my signature on documents transferring my retirement accounts, smaller investments, and even took out loans in my name. Quite creative, I must admit. Richard turned to Diane in shock. You said Mom had authorized all of this. Don't look at me like that, Diane hissed. Victoria suggested the loans, and you were perfectly happy to accept the money for your new architecture studio. Fascinating how quickly you turn on each other, I observed. Marcus, who you met earlier, is a former federal prosecutor specializing in financial fraud. He estimates what you've done carries approximately 15 years in prison. Forgery, bank fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, the list is rather impressive. All 3 paled simultaneously. Fortunately for you, I continued, I have no particular interest in seeing my children and daughter-in-law rot in prison. I have an alternative proposal. I slid 3 documents across the table. These are restitution agreements. You will sell everything purchased with my stolen money. The Hamptons vacation home, the new architecture studio, that ridiculous boat, investments made with fraudulent funds. All proceeds will be donated to the new foundation I've established to help seniors without financial means receive dignified care. This is extortion, Victoria protested. No, dear, this is justice. My smile remained cold. The alternative is I call the FBI right now. Marcus has prepared all necessary documentation for a formal complaint. Diane, always the first to recognize a no-win situation, reached for her pen. How long do we have? 90 days to liquidate everything. Marcus will supervise the process to ensure nothing is hidden. I looked at each of them. And there's one more condition. All 3 of you will work here as volunteers, 1 weekend per month, for the next 2 years. Work? Here? Victoria looked horrified. Yes. Richard will assist with maintenance and repairs. Diane will help residents with financial planning. And you, Victoria dear, will be perfect for the laundry department. The silence that followed was absolute. Why? Richard finally asked. Why not just turn us in? Because you need to see what you do when you discard people, I replied, emotion finally entering my voice. You need to see the faces of those who are abandoned, forgotten. You need to understand what it means to treat human beings as inconveniences. I approached the table again. And frankly, because this will be far more instructive than prison. I imagine your next Hamptons party will be considerably less pleasant when you have to explain why you sold the house, Richard. Or your banker colleagues questioning why you suddenly liquidated all those stocks, Diane. Or your country club friends asking about the boat that disappeared. Victoria. I leaned forward. You chose money over family. Now you'll have neither. Diane was the first to recover her composure. Years of high-stakes negotiations serving her well even in this personal crisis. We'll need time to review these agreements with our attorneys, she said, attempting to regain some control of the situation. By all means, I replied, sliding a business card across the table. Marcus's contact information. Your attorneys can reach out directly. However, I should mention that the statute of limitations on financial fraud continues to run while you deliberate. The agreements include a non-prosecution clause that becomes void after 7 days. Victoria looked as though she might faint. This will ruin us socially. People will ask questions. Indeed they will, I agreed, just as I had to answer questions from the nursing staff about why my children never visited, or explain to my new friends here why I didn't receive calls on my birthday. Life is full of awkward social moments, isn't it? Richard had been uncharacteristically quiet, studying my face as if seeing me for the first time. Dad knew, he finally said, not a question, but a realization. He knew exactly what would happen, and he planned for it. Your father was an excellent judge of character, I confirmed. He understood people's motivations better than they understood themselves. It was what made him so successful in business and in marriage, Richard added softly, glancing around the office at the photograph of Howard on my desk. He really loved you. Yes, I said simply, and I him. Which is why I'm implementing this solution rather than pursuing criminal charges. Howard wouldn't have wanted his children in prison, no matter what they'd done. Diane gathered the documents with trembling hands. We'll have our response within the week. Excellent. I rose, signaling the end of our meeting. Oh, and one more thing. I've scheduled you all for orientation this Sunday at 8 a.m. Your first volunteer shift begins immediately after. But we haven't agreed to anything yet, Victoria protested. Consider it a good faith demonstration of your intentions, I suggested mildly, and an opportunity to see exactly what you're agreeing to. Appropriate attire will be provided. After they left, Victoria practically running to their luxury SUV, Diane rigid with controlled fury, and Richard looking back once with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, I allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. This confrontation had been 2 years in the making, yet I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction. Instead, I felt a strange hollowness, as if I'd finally lanced a festering wound. Necessary, but painful nonetheless. Marcus returned to my office, closing the door quietly behind him. How did it go? He asked, though he'd likely heard every word through the thin walls. About as expected, I replied, removing my reading glasses and massaging the bridge of my nose. Victoria is concerned about her social standing. Diane is strategizing damage control, and Richard might actually be thinking. Marcus nodded, taking the seat recently vacated by my daughter. Howard always said Richard had the most potential for growth. He just needed the right catalyst. I smiled sadly. Howard always believed people could change, given the right motivation. It was one of his most endearing qualities, that fundamental optimism. And you, Beatrice? Do you believe people can change? The question gave me pause. 2 years ago, I might have answered differently, but after my time at Golden Sunset, seeing residents transform from withdrawn shells into engaged, purposeful individuals when given the right environment, I'd witnessed remarkable changes. I believe capacity for change diminishes with age, but never disappears entirely, I answered carefully. My children are in their 40s, old enough to have established patterns, but young enough to recognize when those patterns have failed them. Marcus nodded, clearly satisfied with my response. The foundation paperwork has been filed. Once the restitution funds start coming in, we'll be able to accept our first scholarship residents. This was the part of my plan that gave me the most satisfaction, using the recovered funds to provide care for elderly individuals who would otherwise be relegated to substandard state facilities or worse. The Warner Foundation for Dignity in Aging would ensure that lack of financial resources wouldn't condemn seniors to their final years in squalor or isolation. We should prioritize veterans and former educators, I suggested. And single women over 75, They're particularly vulnerable to financial insecurity. I'll make a note, Marcus replied, rising to leave. And Beatrice? Howard would be proud. After he left, I wheeled my chair to the window overlooking the grounds. Residents were enjoying the afternoon sunshine, some participating in a Tai Chi class on the lawn, others tending the community garden we'd installed. Mrs. Abernathy, a former concert pianist who'd arrived nearly catatonic after her family abandoned her, was playing the baby grand piano we'd placed in the common room, her music drifting through the open windows. This was what dignity looked like. Not just clean facilities and adequate medical care, but purpose, community, recognition of worth regardless of age or ability. Sunday arrived with surprising swiftness. I arranged to be absent during my children's orientation, asking my operations director to handle it instead. Some boundaries were necessary. This was a consequence, not a revenge fantasy. I had no desire to witness their humiliation as they donned maintenance uniforms and laundry smocks. By mid-afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I made a casual tour of the facility, clipboard in hand, as if conducting a routine inspection. I found Richard in the East Wing, awkwardly attempting to fix a leaking faucet under the supervision of our head of maintenance, a no-nonsense former Navy engineer who appeared thoroughly unimpressed with my son's Ivy League credentials. The wrench, son. No, the other wrench. Have you never held tools before? Mr. Garrison was saying as I passed. In the laundry facility, Victoria, her designer clothes replaced by a practical uniform, her perfectly manicured nails hidden by rubber gloves, was learning to operate the industrial folding machine. The look of absolute mortification on her face as she handled other people's undergarments would have been comical if it weren't so revealing of her character. Diane, perhaps faring best of the three, was in the community room helping a group of residents organize their financial documents. Her expertise in banking was actually useful here, though her corporate efficiency was being severely tested by Mr. Goldstein's insistence on recounting every financial decision he'd made since 1962. None of them saw me observing from doorways or around corners. The invisibility of the elderly, something I had resented at first, now served me well. I watched them struggle with unfamiliar tasks, their frustration evident but contained under the watchful eyes of my staff who had been briefed on the situation. By day's end, when they trudged to their vehicles, exhausted, disheveled, and stripped of their usual polished veneers, I felt no satisfaction, only a quiet hope that the seeds of understanding might have been planted. Not just understanding of what they had done to me, but of what happens when society discards its elders as used-up, inconvenient remnants. 5 days later, Marcus brought me their signed agreements. All three had acquiesced to my terms, likely realizing the alternatives were far worse. The dismantling of their fraudulently acquired assets would begin immediately. Phase 1 complete, I murmured, watching the sun set over the desert from my office window. Now for the real work. The liquidation process was swift and merciless. Within 30 days, Richard's architectural studio had been sold to a competitor, Victoria's beloved boat was listed at auction, and Diane had divested the stock portfolio she'd built with my stolen retirement funds. The Hamptons vacation home, barely furnished and hardly enjoyed, went on the market at a slight loss given the urgency of the sale. Marcus oversaw every transaction with meticulous attention to detail, ensuring nothing was hidden or undervalued. Each time a sale completed, the funds were transferred directly to the newly established Warner Foundation for Dignity in Aging. The social fallout was exactly as I had anticipated. Richard's professional circle buzzed with speculation about his sudden downsizing. Victoria's country club friends whispered about the family's apparent financial troubles. Diane's banking colleagues raised eyebrows at her hasty liquidation of what had been described as long-term investment strategies. I monitored these developments not out of malice, but to ensure compliance. The humiliation they experienced was a natural consequence of their actions, not an additional punishment I had engineered. Their weekend volunteer shifts continued, each more revealing than the last. Victoria's initial revulsion at handling laundry gradually transformed into mechanical efficiency. She would never enjoy the work, but her pride demanded she excel at whatever she was assigned. Diane's sessions helping residents with financial planning revealed how many had been exploited by their own families, forcing her to confront uncomfortable parallels. Richard, perhaps surprisingly, showed the most adaptation, moving from fumbling incompetence with basic maintenance tasks to genuine problem-solving, even offering design suggestions for making residence rooms more accessible. By the third month, the restitution fund had grown to $6.2 million, still far short of what they had stolen, but a significant start. Marcus and I began reviewing applications for the Foundation's first scholarship recipients. "This one," I said, pushing forward a file. "Margaret Jenkins, 82, former elementary school teacher. Husband died without life insurance. Reverse mortgage consumed her home equity. Now living in her car." Marcus added her name to our priority list. "And this gentleman, Samuel Washington, 79, Vietnam veteran, lost his apartment when the building was converted to luxury condos, currently staying in a shelter that's threatening to evict him due to his early-stage dementia." One by one, we identified the most vulnerable cases, those who had fallen through America's paper-thin safety net for the elderly. By the end of the day, we had selected 20 candidates for immediate assistance. "How soon can we bring them in?" I asked. "The East Wing renovations will be complete next week. We could begin intake the following Monday." I nodded, satisfaction warming me for the first time in months. This was the purpose behind all of it, not revenge against my children, but reclaiming my agency to help others who had been discarded like I almost was. That Sunday brought another volunteer shift from my children and daughter-in-law. I normally kept my distance during these times, allowing my staff to supervise them, but today was different. As they arrived, punctual now, having learned that tardiness resulted in extended hours, I called them into my office. "Good morning," I greeted them, gesturing to the chairs opposite my desk. "Before you begin your duties today, I wanted to share something with you." Their wariness was evident. Over the past months, our interactions had been minimal and strictly professional. "Tomorrow we welcome the first 20 recipients of the Warner Foundation scholarships," I explained, sliding a folder across the desk. "These individuals will receive full care residency at no cost, funded by the restitution you're providing." Richard opened the folder, scanning the brief biographies of our selected recipients. His expression softened as he read. "They'll be staying in the East Wing," I continued. "I'd like the three of you to help prepare their rooms today. Victoria, you'll oversee final cleaning and bed preparation. Diane, you'll organize welcome packages with essential items. Richard, you'll assist with furniture arrangement to accommodate various mobility issues." "Is this part of our punishment?" Victoria asked, her tone suggesting she'd grown tired of these lessons. "No, Victoria," I replied evenly. "This is part of your education. These 20 individuals represent thousands like them, elderly Americans who worked hard all their lives only to find themselves abandoned, impoverished, and forgotten in their final years." I stood, moving to the window. "Tomorrow you'll meet Mrs. Jenkins, who taught third grade for 42 years, including several students who went on to become doctors and lawyers, none of whom responded to her pleas for help when she became homeless. Or Mr. Washington, who received 2 Purple Hearts in Vietnam and now can't remember to take his medication without assistance." I turned back to face them. "You'll help welcome them because they deserve dignity. And because I want you to see the faces of the people your restitution is helping, to understand that your temporary discomfort is creating permanent salvation for others." Something shifted in Richard's expression. A realization, perhaps, or the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him since this began. "We'll do it," he said, before either Diane or Victoria could object. The next morning, I stood in the East Wing entrance as our shuttle bus arrived with the first Warner Foundation scholarship recipients. My children and Victoria were positioned behind me, dressed in the facility's volunteer uniforms, name tags prominently displayed. Mrs. Jenkins was the first to disembark, clutching a plastic bag containing what appeared to be all her remaining possessions. Her clothes were clean but worn, her posture stooped from osteoporosis, her eyes wary from months of vulnerability on the streets. "Mrs. Jenkins," I greeted her, extending my hand. "I'm Beatrice Warner. Welcome to your new home." She took my hand tentatively. "Is it really true? I can stay here? I don't have to leave?" "It's really true," I assured her. "This is your home for as long as you wish it to be." Tears filled her eyes. "I taught school for 42 years. I never thought I'd end up with nowhere to go." "None of us do," I said gently, guiding her inside, where Richard waited to show her to her room. One by one, our new residents arrived, each with their story of loss, abandonment, or cruel circumstance. A retired nurse who'd spent her savings caring for her husband with Alzheimer's. A former factory worker whose pension had been eliminated in a corporate bankruptcy. A 90-year-old author whose modest royalties couldn't cover the cost of his heart medications and housing simultaneously. I watched my children's faces as they helped these elderly strangers settle into their rooms, explaining the amenities, answering questions, carrying the meager bags that represented entire lives compressed into portable belongings. Victoria's usual disdain was absent, replaced by an uncomfortable awareness. Diane's efficiency remained, but softened with each resident she assisted. And Richard was actually listening, bending to hear soft voices, kneeling despite his designer knees to help an old man retrieve a dropped photograph. By day's end, all 20 scholarship recipients were settled in. As my children prepared to leave, exhausted from the emotional and physical labor of the day, I stopped them at the door. "Thank you for your help today," I said simply. Richard lingered after the others had gone, hesitating as if wanting to say something, but unsure how to begin. "What is it, Richard?" I prompted. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said finally. "She has the same birthday as you." I nodded, surprised he'd noticed this detail. "It could have been you, Mom," he continued, his voice unusually quiet. "If Dad hadn't created that trust, if you didn't have the resources to fight back, it could have been you living in your car." "Yes," I acknowledged. "It could have been." He met my eyes then, and for the first time in decades, I saw my son, not the successful architect, not Howard's heir, not Victoria's husband, but the thoughtful boy who had once possessed such capacity for empathy before ambition and social climbing had buried it. "I'll see you next Sunday," he said, and walked to his car alone. 3 months into our arrangement, the first cracks began to show, not in my carefully constructed plan, but in the facades my children had maintained for so long. The weekly volunteer shifts, initially endured as bitter punishment, were beginning to reveal unexpected consequences. Richard arrived early one Sunday, finding me in the garden where I often spent quiet mornings before the facility fully awakened. "Mom," he said, approaching hesitantly. "Do you have a minute?" I gestured to the empty bench beside me. "Of course." He sat, his posture stiff, hands clasped between his knees. "I've been thinking about Mr. Abernathy's room. The layout isn't working for his wheelchair. The bathroom door is too narrow, and he can't reach the closet shelves." This was unexpected, Richard showing concern for a resident beyond his assigned duties. "I've sketched some modifications," he continued, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Simple changes that would make a huge difference for his mobility. I could implement them myself, with the maintenance team's help." I examined his drawings, thoughtful, practical adaptations that showed genuine understanding of Mr. Abernathy's needs. "These are excellent, Richard. Have you considered that similar modifications might benefit other residents with mobility issues?" Something flickered across his face. Interest, perhaps even excitement. "I could do a facility-wide assessment. Create a priority list based on resident needs. Develop standardized solutions that could be implemented across all your properties." "Our properties," I corrected gently. His expression clouded. "After what we did, I hardly think—" "The Warner Foundation owns these facilities," I interrupted. "And despite everything, you are still a Warner. What you choose to do with that legacy is up to you." The following week, Victoria was absent from the volunteer shift. Richard explained that they were taking some time apart. His voice held no particular emotion as he related this development, as if reporting a mild change in weather. Diane arrived, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. When asked about it, she merely mumbled something about restructuring at the bank and threw herself into her assigned tasks with unusual intensity. I observed these changes with the analytical detachment that had served me well throughout my academic career. The pressure was causing structural failures in their carefully constructed lives, exactly as Howard would have predicted. My husband had always maintained that character revealed itself under duress, and my children were proving his theory correct. By month 4, the restitution fund had grown to $8.7 million. The Hamptons house had finally sold, along with Diane's investment portfolio and most of Richard's architectural practice assets. Victoria's status remained unclear. She attended her mandated shifts, but volunteered no personal information. The foundation was now supporting 47 scholarship residents across 3 facilities with plans to expand further. Each new intake day, my children participated in welcoming these vulnerable elderly individuals, a process that had evolved from obligatory duty to something approaching genuine involvement. One evening after a board meeting, Marcus lingered in my office, reviewing the latest financial reports. "Victoria has filed for divorce," he informed me, his tone neutral. "I suspected as much," I replied, unsurprised. Victoria had married Richard for his prospects and family connections. The architectural wunderkind with the successful father had been a calculated addition to her social climbing strategy. Without the trappings of wealth and status, Richard offered little to someone of Victoria's priorities. "Richard doesn't seem particularly devastated," I observed. Marcus nodded. "In fact, he's requested additional volunteer hours, says he'd rather be here than in their apartment with moving boxes everywhere." This was interesting, seeking refuge in service rather than retreating into self-pity. Perhaps Howard's faith in our son's capacity for growth wasn't misplaced after all. Diane's situation proved more complicated. Her banking career, built on a reputation for ruthless efficiency and unwavering confidence, had begun to crumble. Rumors of her sudden financial difficulties had raised questions about her judgment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her professional demise triggered by the very materialistic values the profession had instilled in her. Despite these personal upheavals, or perhaps because of them, both Richard and Diane were becoming increasingly engaged with the foundation's work. Richard's architectural expertise had evolved into a comprehensive accessibility initiative across all our facilities. Diane, stripped of her banking prestige, had begun developing financial literacy workshops for residents, many of whom had been victimized by predatory financial practices targeting the elderly. 6 months into our arrangement, I invited both of them to my office after their shift. Victoria had stopped attending 3 weeks earlier, choosing to pay financial penalties rather than continue her volunteer service. The divorce proceedings were apparently consuming all her attention. "I've asked you here because I want to discuss the future," I began, once they were seated. "You've both completed half your mandated service hours, and the restitution fund has reached nearly $9 million. They exchanged glances, clearly wondering if I was about to alter our agreement. "The foundation is growing faster than anticipated," I continued. "We now have scholarship programs in 3 facilities, with 2 more planned by year-end. This expansion requires additional oversight." I slid 2 folders across my desk. "These are job offers, legitimate positions with the Warner Foundation, with appropriate salaries and benefits. Richard, we need a director of facility design and accessibility. Diane, we need a financial protection advocate to help residents navigate their financial security." Their surprise was evident. Diane recovered first, her banker's instincts kicking in as she opened her folder to review the details. "This is a real position," she said, scanning the job description, "with a real salary. A significantly smaller salary than you earned at the bank," I acknowledged. "But it comes with something your previous position didn't." "What's that?" she asked. "Purpose," I replied simply. "The opportunity to use your financial expertise to protect vulnerable elderly individuals from the very predatory practices your bank probably employed." Richard had been silent, studying his offer intently. "Why?" he finally asked. "After what we did to you, why would you trust us with these responsibilities?" I considered my answer carefully. This wasn't about forgiveness. Not yet. But it was about possibility. "Because I've been watching you both," I explained. "Not just your compliance with the restitution agreement, but your evolution during these months. You've begun to see the residents as people, not inconveniences. You've applied your skills to improving their lives without being directed to do so. In short, you've shown capacity for growth." I leaned forward. Howard always believed that people could change when properly motivated, not through punishment alone, but through exposure to different perspectives and the opportunity to contribute meaningfully. Diane's analytical mind was already working. "These positions would replace our volunteer requirements?" "They would transform them," I corrected. "You'd still be working here, but as professionals with responsibilities beyond folding laundry or fixing leaky faucets. The foundation needs your skills, if you're willing to use them for something beyond personal gain." Richard closed his folder. "I need time to think about this." "Of course," I agreed. "Take a week, but understand that these offers aren't about easing your punishment. If anything, they require more commitment, more accountability than your current arrangements. After they left, I remained in my office, watching the desert sunset paint the mountains in fading crimson light. Howard and I had often sat together enjoying this view from our backyard, discussing our children's development, worrying about the values they were absorbing from a materialistic culture. The test isn't in the falling, Howard used to say. It's in how you choose to get back up. My children had fallen, partly through their own choices, partly through the values society had reinforced in them. How they chose to rise would determine not just their futures, but the legacy our family would ultimately leave behind. I wasn't certain of their decisions, but for the first time since this began, I felt something like hope. 1 week later, precisely at the appointed time, Richard and Diane returned to my office. They arrived separately, but entered together, an unspoken solidarity between them that I hadn't witnessed in years. "We've made our decisions," Diane began, ever the direct one. I gestured for them to sit. "I'm listening." Richard placed his folder on my desk. "I've decided to accept the position, with one condition." This was unexpected. "What condition?" "I want to expand the role," he said, meeting my eyes with newfound confidence. "Beyond just retrofitting existing facilities, I want to design a prototype for a new kind of senior living community altogether, one built from the ground up with dignity and independence as the core principles." I studied my son's face, seeing an enthusiasm I hadn't witnessed since he was a boy, showing Howard and me his first architectural drawings. "That's quite ambitious. I've been researching elder-friendly design innovations from Scandinavia and Japan," he continued, "integrating community spaces that combat isolation, implementing universal design principles that accommodate changing physical abilities without feeling institutional. We could revolutionize how Americans experience aging." The passion in his voice was genuine, not the practiced enthusiasm he'd once used to impress clients, but something deeper, more authentic. "And you, Diane?" I turned to my daughter, who'd been watching her brother with an unreadable expression. She smoothed an invisible wrinkle from her skirt, a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. "I've received an offer from Central Bank. They want me back. Senior VP position, significant salary increase, corner office." Her voice was flat, reciting benefits without emotion. "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I had never wished for my children's professional destruction. "I turned it down," she continued, surprising me. "I'm accepting your position instead, but like Richard, I want to expand it." "How so?" "The financial exploitation of seniors is a $3 billion annual criminal industry," she stated, the banker's precision returning to her voice. "It's not enough to just educate our residents. I want to create a comprehensive protection program that can be implemented nationwide. Financial guardianship services, fraud detection systems, advocacy at the legislative level." I leaned back, genuinely impressed. "That's considerably beyond the scope of the position I offered." "Yes," she acknowledged, "but it's the position that's needed. I've spent 20 years helping wealthy people become wealthier. I'd like to spend the next 20 preventing vulnerable people from becoming victims." The transformation in my children was remarkable, not just in their career aspirations, but in how they presented themselves. Gone was Richard's carefully cultivated air of creative genius. Gone was Diane's sharp-edged corporate persona. They sat before me as simpler, more authentic versions of themselves. "What about Victoria?" I asked Richard gently. A shadow crossed his face. "The divorce will be final next month. She's taken a position in New York, something in fashion marketing. She won't be completing her volunteer hours." "I'm aware," I replied. "Marcus has arranged for her financial penalties to be added to the restitution fund. She's chosen her path." Richard nodded, a mixture of relief and sadness in his expression. "It's for the best. We wanted different things. We always did. I just couldn't see it until all the external trappings were stripped away," I finished for him. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "I considered them both. These children who had discarded me when I became inconvenient, who had stolen from me without remorse, who had assumed I would fade quietly into institutionalized obscurity. The anger I had nursed for so long had mellowed into something more complex, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. They had been products of their environment, their values shaped by a culture that worshipped youth, success, and material acquisition above all else. Your positions will start next month, I decided. Standard probationary period applies. You'll report to the foundation board, not to me directly. Your restitution obligations remain in effect until fully satisfied, though we can adjust the payment schedule to accommodate your new salaries. Relief washed over their faces, not at escaping consequences, but at being offered a path forward. "Thank you," Diane said formally. "Don't thank me yet," I cautioned. "These roles will be challenging in ways your previous careers never were. You'll be fighting against systemic ageism, limited resources, and bureaucratic indifference. Success will not be measured in profits or prestige." Richard smiled. A genuine smile that reminded me of Howard. Sounds exactly like what we both need. After they left, Marcus entered with the day's reports. "I take it they accepted?" "With conditions," I replied. "Ambitious ones, just like their parents," he observed wryly. I raised an eyebrow. "I was never ambitious. With all due respect, Beatrice, you were a female mathematics professor in the 1970s. You married a visionary entrepreneur and helped build his business while maintaining your academic career. And now you're revolutionizing elder care while orchestrating your children's moral redemption. If that's not ambition, I don't know what is." His assessment startled a laugh from me, the first real laugh I'd experienced in longer than I cared to admit. That evening, I took my usual walk through the facility, observing the residents engaged in their evening activities. Mr. Washington was teaching chess to Mr. Abernathy, their earlier animosity forgotten in their shared strategic focus. Mrs. Jenkins led a small poetry reading in the library corner, her teacher's voice carrying clearly as she guided her elderly students through Emily Dickinson. In the art room, 3 scholarship recipients worked on a collaborative mural depicting their life stories, a project Richard had suggested and funded from his personal accounts. These people, once discarded and forgotten, had formed a community of purpose and dignity. They had reclaimed their identities beyond their age and infirmities. They had found meaning in their final chapters. As I watched them, I realized that Howard's trust had achieved something far beyond securing my financial independence. It had created the conditions for a legacy neither of us had anticipated, a foundation that might genuinely change how American society treated its elderly members. And perhaps, unexpectedly, it had offered our children a second chance to become the people we had always hoped they would be. Later that night, I sat at my desk writing in my journal, a habit Howard had encouraged throughout our marriage. "History is written by those who take time to record it," he used to say. I had been documenting this journey since the day my children had left me at Golden Sunset, initially as evidence of their abandonment, later as a record of my response, and now as a testament to the unexpected evolution of our family saga. Today's entry felt different, less analytical, more contemplative. 6 months ago, I believed this was about justice, my children paying for their betrayal, learning through consequence what they refused to learn through example. Now I'm less certain. What began as restitution has become renovation, not just of buildings or programs, but of human character. Howard would say this was the plan all along. Perhaps it was. My brilliant, far-seeing husband always looked beyond the immediate horizon. Our children are not who they were. Neither am I. We have all been transformed by this crucible, burned away of pretense, reduced to our essential elements, and reformed into something new. Whether this transformation is permanent remains to be seen. But for now at least, possibility exists where only bitterness once resided. I closed the journal, placed it in my desk drawer, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Tucson facility opening, the 3rd intake of scholarship recipients, budget meetings for the expanded programs. At 75, I was not finishing my life's work, but beginning it. The thought brought a smile to my face as I drifted toward sleep. The Warner Foundation's growth accelerated beyond even my most optimistic projections. Within 8 months of Richard and Diane accepting their positions, our program had expanded to include 7 facilities across Arizona and New Mexico, with over 200 scholarship residents receiving full care. Richard's prototype for a new elder living community had moved from concept to architectural plans, with construction slated to begin outside Sedona the following spring. His design incorporated everything from cutting-edge accessibility features to intergenerational spaces where seniors could interact with community members of all ages. The isolation that so often characterized traditional nursing homes was systematically eliminated through thoughtful design choices. Diane, meanwhile, had transformed the financial protection program into a model being studied by state legislators. Her intimate knowledge of banking practices, the very knowledge she had once used to maximize profits, now served to identify and prevent exploitation of vulnerable seniors. She had assembled a team of retired financial professionals who volunteered their time to review residents' finances, identifying potential fraud, and establishing safeguards against future abuse. My own role had evolved as well. As the Foundation's work gained recognition, I found myself increasingly in demand as a speaker and advocate. I testified before state legislative committees on elder financial abuse, gave interviews to national publications about dignity-centered care approaches, and consulted with other senior living facilities seeking to implement our model. The restitution fund, now fully paid through the liquidation of my children's fraudulently acquired assets, had grown to $4 million. Enough to sustain our scholarship program indefinitely through careful investment and management. On a warm Tuesday morning in October, just over a year since my children had first discovered my transformation from discard to director, I sat in my office reviewing quarterly reports when my secretary announced an unexpected visitor. "Mrs. Warner, there's a Victoria Mills here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." This was a surprise. Since finalizing her divorce from Richard 8 months earlier, Victoria had made no attempt to contact me or complete her mandated volunteer service. The financial penalties had been paid in full, likely by her wealthy parents, but she had otherwise disappeared from our lives. "Send her in," I said, curious about this sudden appearance. Victoria entered looking exactly as I remembered, expensively dressed, perfectly coiffed, face arranged in the practiced neutral expression of someone accustomed to negotiating social hierarchies. Yet something was different. A subtle tension around her eyes, perhaps, or a slight hesitation in her normally confident stride. "Beatrice," she greeted me, taking the visitor's chair without waiting for an invitation. "You're looking well." "As are you, Victoria. What brings you to Phoenix? I thought you were settled in New York." She adjusted her designer handbag on her lap, a nervous gesture I'd never observed in her before. "I've been following the Foundation's progress in the news. The feature in The New Yorker was quite flattering." "They were interested in our model," I acknowledged, "though I suspect you didn't fly across the country to discuss magazine articles." A hint of her old impatience flickered across her face before being quickly suppressed. "No, I've come with a proposal." This was intriguing. "I'm listening." "My mother has been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's," Victoria stated, her voice carefully controlled. "My father is struggling with the reality of her care needs. They have substantial resources, but limited knowledge of quality care options." Understanding dawned. "And you thought of us." "The Warner Foundation has become the gold standard in elder care," she said, sounding almost reluctant to admit it. "I'd like to secure a place for my mother in one of your facilities." "Our facilities aren't for sale, Victoria," I reminded her gently. "They operate on a balanced model. Half scholarship residents, half standard admissions based on need and fit, not ability to pay." "I understand that," she replied. "I'm not trying to buy my way in. I'm asking professionally, as someone who recognizes quality care when she sees it." I studied her carefully, looking for the manipulative daughter-in-law I had known. She met my gaze directly, something vulnerable and honest in her expression that I had never witnessed before. "Your parents live in Connecticut, correct?" I asked. She nodded. "We don't currently have facilities on the East Coast." "I know," she said. "They would relocate. My father has already spoken with a real estate agent about their house." This was unexpected, the level of commitment such a move would represent. "Why us, Victoria? There are excellent memory care facilities much closer to their current home." She hesitated, seemingly struggling with her answer. "Because I've seen what you've built, not just the physical spaces, but the philosophy behind them. My mother deserves dignity in her decline. Your foundation understands what that means in practice, not just in promotional materials." I leaned back, considering her request. "We have a thorough assessment process. Your mother would need to be evaluated by our medical director. There's a waiting list for standard admissions. We understand. We're prepared to follow the proper channels." She paused. "And I'm prepared to complete my volunteer service. All of it. Wherever I'm needed most." Now that was truly surprising. "May I ask what prompted this change of heart?" Victoria smoothed her skirt, a gesture reminiscent of Diane when uncomfortable with vulnerability. My mother started showing symptoms 3 years ago. Subtle things, forgotten appointments, repeated stories, misplaced items. My father and I dismissed them, attributed them to normal aging. We were inconvenienced by her decline. The parallel to my own situation hung unspoken between us. When the diagnosis came, she continued, I recognized what we had done, what I had participated in doing to you. The pattern was identical. The irritation, the dismissal of legitimate needs, the prioritization of our convenience over her dignity. For the first time in our acquaintance, I saw Victoria as a complete human being rather than a social climbing stereotype. The realization humbled me slightly. Had I been guilty of the same dismissal I accused my children of, seeing Victoria as a one-dimensional character rather than a complex person capable of growth? Your mother is welcome to apply, I said finally. She'll receive the same consideration as any other applicant. No preferential treatment, but no prejudice based on our history either. Thank you, Victoria said, genuine relief in her voice. And my volunteer service? We have a new facility opening in Santa Fe next month. They'll need help with the initial resident intake and orientation. It's demanding work, physically and emotionally. She nodded. I'll be there. As Victoria rose to leave, she hesitated, then placed an envelope on my desk. Richard asked me to give you this when I saw you. He said you'd understand what it means. After she left, I opened the envelope to find a simple greeting card. Inside, in Richard's architectural lettering, was a quote I recognized immediately as Howard's. The true measure of justice isn't in the punishment delivered, but in the healing achieved. Beneath it, Richard had written, Dad was right, as usual. Thank you for the hardest gift I've ever received. I placed the card in my desk drawer alongside Howard's photograph. Outside my window, a new group of residents was being led through the garden by their orientation guide. Vulnerable elders embarking on what would likely be their final chapter, but one marked by dignity and care rather than neglect. The foundation Howard's foresight had made possible was growing beyond anything we could have imagined, not just in physical facilities, but in its influence on how American society viewed and treated its elderly members. And perhaps most surprisingly, in its impact on our own family's healing. Justice and compassion, it seemed, were not mutually exclusive after all. 18 months after my children discovered my transformation from discarded mother to foundation director, I celebrated my 77th birthday. Unlike the previous 2 birthdays spent at Golden Sunset, the first entirely forgotten by my family, the second acknowledged with impersonal gifts, this occasion was marked by a small gathering in the community garden. Richard had flown in from Sedona, where he was overseeing construction of our prototype community. Diane had rearranged her legislative testimony schedule to be present. Even Victoria, now our volunteer coordinator for the Santa Fe facility, had sent flowers and a handwritten card, a gesture of respect, if not quite familial warmth. The celebration was modest, cake shared with residents, a string quartet comprised of fellow seniors playing Vivaldi, meaningful conversation rather than expensive presentations. Howard would have approved entirely. As the evening wound down, Richard and Diane lingered after the other guests departed. We sat in the garden gazebo, watching the desert sunset paint the mountains in vibrant oranges and purples. The Sedona project is ahead of schedule, Richard reported, his voice containing genuine enthusiasm rather than the practiced charisma he'd once affected. The geothermal heating system is fully installed, and the solar array will be operational next month. And the intergenerational spaces? I asked, having taken particular interest in this aspect of his design. The daycare center is nearly complete. We've already received applications from 30 families who love the idea of their children spending time with adopted grandparents. The community college has committed to holding classes in our learning center as well, everything from literature to computer science. Diane, more reserved as always but noticeably softer around the edges, added her own update. The financial protection legislation passed in Arizona. New Mexico and Colorado are introducing similar bills next session. We're creating a model that could go national within 5 years. I studied my children in the fading light, these accomplished, purposeful adults who bore little resemblance to the materialistic, self-absorbed people who had deposited me at Golden Sunset 2 years earlier. The transformation remained something of a marvel to me, evidence of human capacity for growth that even my mathematician's calculating mind hadn't fully anticipated. Your father would be proud, I said simply. Of the foundation, yes, but more importantly, of who you've become. Richard glanced at Diane, some unspoken communication passing between them. Actually, Mom, there's something we wanted to discuss with you. The formality in his tone caught my attention. What is it? Diane took over, ever the direct one. We've been reviewing the foundation's governance structure. As we continue to expand, the leadership model needs to evolve as well. I nodded. This was a conversation I'd been expecting. You're suggesting a more robust board structure, I assume? Less centralized decision-making? Yes, but more specifically, Richard continued, we'd like to implement a succession plan. You've been working non-stop for 2 years. The foundation needs to be sustainable beyond any single leader. I suppressed a smile. My children were trying to retire me, gently this time, professionally rather than personally. But the irony wasn't lost on me. I'm hardly at death's door, I noted dryly. My cognitive faculties remain intact, despite my advanced years. They both looked momentarily flustered, until they caught the twinkle in my eye. We're not suggesting you step down, Diane clarified hastily. Just that we create a structure that doesn't depend entirely on you, for the foundation's long-term sustainability. What did you have in mind? I asked, genuinely curious about their thinking. They outlined a thoughtful reorganization, an expanded board of directors including elder care experts, financial professionals, and most importantly, resident representatives from each facility. Daily operations would be managed by an executive team rather than falling primarily on my shoulders. My role would shift to that of founding director, focusing on strategic vision and advocacy rather than administrative details. Their proposal was thorough, professional, and showed genuine concern not just for the foundation's future, but for my well-being. It was, I had to admit, exactly what Howard would have recommended. I'll consider it, I said when they finished. It's a sensible approach. They seemed relieved by my receptiveness. As they should be. I had been contemplating similar changes myself. The foundation had grown beyond what one person could effectively manage, no matter how mathematically inclined their mind. After they left, I remained in the garden as darkness settled over the desert. The residents had returned to their rooms or community spaces, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the emerging stars overhead. Howard and I had often sat together on our patio on evenings like this, discussing the future, making plans, adjusting our calculations based on changing variables. We had created contingencies for nearly every scenario, including the one that had ultimately unfolded. Our children prioritizing material gain over familial responsibility. What we hadn't fully calculated was the transformative potential of consequences properly applied. Not punishment for its own sake, but the educational power of experiencing the direct results of one's actions. We had underestimated how completely this process could reshape not just behavior, but fundamental values. The next morning, I invited Marcus to join me for coffee in my office. Over the years, he had evolved from Howard's attorney to my most trusted advisor and friend. His perspective would be valuable in navigating this transition. Richard and Diane want to restructure the foundation, I explained, outlining their proposal. Marcus listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. It's a solid plan, addresses the sustainability concerns I've been raising. But the real question is, are you ready to step back? I considered his question seriously. When Howard first created our contingency trust, the goal had been simple. Ensure I wouldn't be abandoned and exploited in my later years. The foundation had evolved from that defensive beginning into something far more meaningful, a vehicle for systemic change in how society treated its elderly members. I'm ready for a different role, I acknowledged, not retirement. I've seen firsthand what happens when purpose is removed from one's life, but focusing my energy where it can have the most impact rather than being consumed by administrative details. And your children? Marcus asked. Are you comfortable with them assuming greater leadership? This was the heart of the matter, wasn't it? After their betrayal, could I truly entrust Howard's legacy, our legacy, to the very people who had once discarded me? They're not the same people who left me here 2 years ago, I said slowly. The foundation changed them, as it changed me. Howard always believed in second chances, in people's capacity to learn and grow when properly motivated. Marcus nodded. He was an optimist that way. An optimist with a mathematician's contingency planning, I corrected with a smile. He calculated the probabilities and prepared for the worst while hoping for better. It's what made him both visionary and practical. So you'll approve their proposal? With modifications, I decided. The board should include at least 3 scholarship recipients, people who understand elder vulnerability from direct experience, and Victoria should be offered a position on the executive team. Her work in Santa Fe has been exceptional, and her perspective as someone who witnessed both sides of this story would be valuable. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You continue to surprise me, Beatrice. Good, I replied with a hint of mischief. At 77, I'd hate to become predictable. That afternoon, I began drafting the restructuring plan that would guide the Warner Foundation into its next phase. As I worked, I glanced occasionally at Howard's photograph on my desk, imagining his approving smile at how his insurance policy had yielded dividends beyond anything we had calculated. What had begun as protection against abandonment had transformed into purpose. What had started as justice had evolved into legacy. And what had been broken, our family, our trust, our connections, was being rebuilt in new and stronger configurations. Not perfect, not complete, but healing. Howard would consider that the best return on investment of all. The transition unfolded gradually over the following months. The expanded board was established, with 7 outside directors joining myself, Richard, Diane, and 3 resident representatives elected by their peers. Victoria accepted the position of Executive Director of East Coast Operations, a new division created to explore expansion opportunities in the northeastern states. My role as founding director gave me the freedom to focus on advocacy and vision while shedding the daily operational responsibilities that had begun to tax even my considerable energy. At 77, I was forced to acknowledge certain physical limitations, though my mind remained as sharp as ever. The Warner model of elder care had begun attracting national attention. A feature in the New York Times described our approach as revolutionary and dignity-centered. Healthcare policy experts from major universities requested tours and interviews. State legislators from across the country consulted with our team when drafting elder protection bills. All of this external validation was gratifying, but the true measure of our success resided in the daily lives of our residents. Mrs. Jenkins, once homeless despite decades of teaching service, now led our intergenerational education program, bringing together senior residents and local students. Mr. Washington, the Vietnam veteran who'd been facing eviction due to his early dementia, had stabilized under proper medical care and now tended our community gardens with meticulous attention. Each life restored to dignity represented a small victory against a system that typically discarded the elderly once their productive years had ended. 6 months after my birthday, Richard invited me to Sedona for the ribbon-cutting ceremony at our prototype community, now completed and ready for its first residents. Named Horizon House rather than bearing the Warner name, a decision I had fully supported. The facility represented the physical manifestation of everything we had learned about creating environments where elders could thrive rather than merely exist. The architecture was stunning, Richard's finest work. Buildings nestled harmoniously into the red rock landscape, their design both beautiful and practical. Solar arrays provided most of the facility's power needs, while rainwater harvesting and xeriscaping minimized environmental impact. But the true innovation lay in how the spaces functioned. Unlike traditional retirement communities that segregated the elderly from broader society, Horizon House was integrated with its surroundings. A community cafe operated by residents and open to the public. Art studios where senior artists taught classes to all ages. Medical facilities discreetly incorporated without dominating the environment. Apartments and rooms designed for varying levels of independence, allowing residents to transition as needed without leaving their community. The day before the official opening, Richard gave me a private tour. As we walked the grounds, I noticed he seemed unusually pensive. "Something on your mind?" I asked, as we rested on a bench overlooking the central courtyard. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Dad hadn't created that trust? If we had just sold the house and things had continued normally?" I considered his question carefully. "I think about it often," I admitted. Probability calculations are hard to resist for a mathematician. The most likely scenario would have been my continued residence at Golden Sunset in its previous incarnation. Adequate care, but little purpose. Occasional visits from you and Diane out of obligation rather than connection. A gradual fading, both mentally and physically. Richard winced slightly at this clinical assessment. But alternative scenarios exist, I continued. Perhaps I would have found purpose even within those constraints. Started a reading group or advocated for better conditions. Human determination can thrive in unlikely environments. You're being generous, Richard said quietly. The truth is, we would have continued our lives largely unaffected by whatever happened to you. Visited on major holidays, sent impersonal gifts, felt occasional guilt easily assuaged by convincing ourselves you were better off with professional care. His honesty was striking, a measure of how far he had come in his self-awareness. Perhaps, I acknowledged, but we'll never know with certainty. That timeline was interrupted by Dad's foresight, Richard added, and your strategic implementation. I smiled at his characterization. Your father and I were always a good team. He provided the vision, I calculated the execution. The perfect partnership, Richard agreed, then fell silent again, seemingly wrestling with something else. There's more you want to discuss, I prompted gently. He nodded. I've been thinking about family lately, about legacy and continuation, natural considerations when creating something meant to outlast oneself, I observed. Yes, but more personally too. He took a deep breath. Victoria and I are talking again. This was unexpected news. In what capacity? As people who shared a significant history and perhaps might have a future? He looked almost embarrassed by this admission. She's changed, Mom. Her experience with her mother's illness, her work with the foundation, it's transformed her priorities. I kept my expression neutral, though my internal reaction was complex. Victoria had indeed demonstrated remarkable growth, proving herself a capable and committed advocate for our cause. But she had also been a willing participant in my abandonment and the financial fraud perpetrated against me. You're concerned I wouldn't approve, I surmised. The thought had crossed my mind, he admitted with a small smile. Our history is complicated, to say the least. I considered my response carefully. The foundation exists because people can change when presented with meaningful consequences and opportunities for growth. If I didn't believe that applied to Victoria as well, I wouldn't have supported her appointment to the executive team. Relief crossed his features. So, you're not opposed to us exploring reconciliation? My approval isn't required for your personal decisions, Richard. You're 47 years old. I paused, then added more gently, but if it matters to you, I believe in second chances based on demonstrated change, not merely promised improvement. Victoria has shown genuine transformation. What you build on that foundation is your choice. He nodded, accepting this measured response. There's one more thing I wanted to discuss with you. A proposal for the future of Horizon House and the foundation itself. As he outlined his idea, a comprehensive research institute attached to Horizon House that would study aging from sociological, psychological, and medical perspectives, I recognized Howard's influence. The vision of creating something that would continue generating positive change for generations to come was precisely the kind of legacy my husband had always aspired to build. The Howard Warner Institute for Aging Studies, Richard concluded. What do you think? Emotion tightened my throat unexpectedly. I think your father would be deeply honored. The next day, at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood between Richard and Diane as community leaders, healthcare professionals, and the first group of incoming residents gathered to celebrate Horizon House's official opening. Victoria attended as well, standing slightly apart, but clearly supportive. When it came time for me to speak, I abandoned my prepared remarks, suddenly feeling they didn't capture what needed to be expressed. 2.5 years ago, I began. I packed a small suitcase and was driven to a retirement home by my children. I was 75 years old, recently widowed, and considered inconvenient to those who should have valued me most. A hush fell over the crowd. Richard and Diane remained steady beside me, accepting this public acknowledgement of our difficult history. That moment could have been an ending. Instead, through a series of circumstances my late husband had remarkably anticipated, it became a beginning, not just for me, but for hundreds of seniors who found themselves similarly discarded after decades of contribution to society and family. I gestured toward the beautiful facility behind me. Horizon House represents more than innovative architecture or compassionate care practices. It embodies a fundamental reconception of what aging can be in a society that too often equates value with youth and productivity. Here, elders are not problems to be managed, but resources to be treasured. Carriers of wisdom, experience, and perspective our youth-obsessed culture desperately needs. Looking out at the assembled crowd, I continued, "This facility exists because people can change, both individuals and systems. My own children, who once saw me as an inconvenience to be stored away, now stand beside me as partners in this vision. The healthcare professionals who once focused solely on physical maintenance now collaborate on holistic well-being. The financial systems that often exploit the elderly now face scrutiny and reform through our advocacy." I turned slightly toward Richard and Diane. Transformation rarely comes easily or without resistance. Sometimes it requires difficult reckonings and painful growth. But when we allow ourselves to be changed by consequence and compassion equally, remarkable healing becomes possible. As I concluded my remarks and the ceremony continued, I felt Howard's presence strongly, not as a ghost or supernatural visitation, but as the natural extension of a shared vision now taking physical form. The trust he had established as an insurance policy had grown into something neither of us could have fully predicted, a legacy that transcended financial security to address fundamental questions of human dignity and worth. The circle that had begun with my abandonment was completing itself in ways both ironic and profound. What had been intended as my removal from family concerns had instead created a new kind of family, one extended beyond blood relations to encompass all who shared our commitment to honoring the final chapters of human lives. Howard, ever the visionary, would have appreciated the elegant symmetry of it all. 3 years to the day after I was left at Golden Sunset, I woke early and made my way to the garden. The desert dawn was breaking over the mountains, painting the sky in delicate pinks and golds. At 78, I had developed a deeper appreciation for such quiet moments. The gift of time, combined with the awareness of its finite nature. The Warner Foundation had grown beyond anything Howard or I could have envisioned. 9 facilities across the Southwest and Northeast, over 600 scholarship residents receiving dignified care, and the Howard Warner Institute generating research that was already influencing national policy on aging and elder protection. More personally significant was the evolution of my relationship with my children. What had begun as a calculated lesson in consequences had transformed into genuine partnership and, gradually, into something approaching reconciliation. Not the easy forgetting that some might call forgiveness, but a more complex healing, one that acknowledged past wounds while creating new patterns of interaction. Richard and Victoria had indeed reconciled, though not in the way I might have expected. Rather than remarrying, they had established a thoughtful friendship and professional collaboration. Richard's architectural vision, combined with Victoria's organizational skills, had proven remarkably effective in our East Coast expansion. Some wounds, it seemed, could heal without completely erasing their scars. Diane had found unexpected fulfillment in her role as our legislative advocate. Her natural intensity, once directed toward corporate advancement, now fueled her passionate defense of elder rights in state capitals across the country. She had recently been appointed to a federal commission studying reforms to Medicare and Social Security, a position that utilized her financial expertise for societal benefit rather than personal gain. As the sun cleared the horizon, I heard footsteps approaching on the garden path. Marcus joined me on the bench, offering a cup of coffee. "You're up early," he observed. "It's an anniversary of sorts," I replied. 3 years ago today, I arrived at Golden Sunset with a small suitcase and diminished expectations. He nodded in understanding. "And now you own the place, among others." "The foundation owns it," I corrected gently. "I'm merely its steward." We sat in companionable silence, sipping our coffee as the garden came alive with morning light. Marcus had become more than Howard's attorney or my advisor. At 74 himself, he represented a peer connection increasingly rare as one ages. "I've been reviewing the Foundation's succession documents," he said finally. "Everything is in order for the transition whenever you decide it's time." I smiled at his diplomatic phrasing. You mean whenever I decide to fully retire or die, whichever comes first? I wouldn't have put it quite so bluntly, he acknowledged with a small smile. But essentially, yes, the Foundation's continuity is secured regardless of any individual's involvement. This had been my primary concern over the past year, ensuring that what we had built would outlast me, that the systemic changes we had initiated would continue beyond my lifetime. Not from ego, but from practical recognition that meaningful transformation requires sustained effort across generations. Howard would be pleased, I said. Continuity was always his focus, even when planning for potential betrayal. Marcus nodded. He once told me that his contingency planning wasn't about punishing potential wrongdoing, but about creating the conditions for right action to eventually emerge. This insight into my husband's thinking warmed me. Howard had always maintained a fundamental optimism about human potential, even while calculating the probabilities of human frailty. Later that morning, my children arrived for our scheduled quarterly leadership meeting. These gatherings had evolved from formal board discussions into more integrated strategic planning sessions, with each of us contributing our particular expertise to the Foundation's continued development. But today's meeting had a different purpose, one my children weren't yet aware of. After our usual updates and discussions concluded, I opened a folder containing documents I had prepared with Marcus's assistance. Before we adjourn, I began, I'd like to address a personal matter that affects the Foundation's future. Richard and Diane exchanged concerned glances, likely assuming this related to my health or capacity. At 78, such concerns would not be unreasonable, though I remained remarkably vital. 3 years ago today, I continued, you brought me to Golden Sunset, believing it would be my final residence before death. That decision, though motivated by self-interest rather than my well-being, inadvertently set in motion everything we've built together since. They listened attentively, no longer defensive about this shared history. We had revisited it enough times that the sharp edges of betrayal had been worn smooth by honest acknowledgement. The anniversary has prompted me to consider my own living arrangements, I explained. While my apartment here has been perfectly adequate, I find myself desiring a change. Are you thinking of moving to Horizon House? Richard asked, obviously pleased by the possibility. We could design a custom space for you in the new East Wing. Actually, no, I replied, sliding the folder toward them. I've purchased a house, my house to be precise, our family home. Their confusion was evident as they opened the folder to find the deed to the house they had sold 3 years earlier, the house where they had grown up, where Howard and I had built our life together. How is this possible? Diane asked, stunned. The developer never began the planned renovations, I completed for her. Financial difficulties, apparently. The property has been tied up in bankruptcy proceedings for the past 2 years. When it finally became available again, I had Marcus monitor the situation closely. You bought back our house, Richard said slowly, as if processing a complex equation. Why didn't you tell us you were considering this? Because I needed to be certain of my own motivations, I explained. Was I seeking to reclaim the past? To make some symbolic statement about reversal of fortune? Neither would be particularly healthy reasons for such a purchase. And what did you conclude? Diane asked, her analytical mind always seeking clarity. That, at 78, I'd like to spend my remaining years in the home where I was happy for so long, I said simply. Not out of nostalgia, but because it's a space that suits me, filled with memory, but also with possibility. I watched their expressions carefully, noting the complex emotions playing across their features. Surprise, certainly. Perhaps a touch of guilt at the reminder of what they had taken from me, but also a growing understanding. The Foundation offices will remain here, I continued. I'll maintain an active role as founding director, though with a slightly reduced schedule. The house will be my private residence, a place to garden again, to host small gatherings, to simply be Beatrice rather than Mrs. Warner, administrator and advocate. It sounds perfect, Richard said, genuine warmth in his voice. When do you move in? Next month, I replied. Some accessibility modifications are being completed first. Nothing that changes the character of the house, just practical accommodations for aging joints. Would you like help with the move? Diane offered. I could take a few days off from the legislative sessions. The offer touched me, not just the practical assistance, but the recognition of significance. I'd appreciate that, I acknowledged. As our meeting concluded and they prepared to leave, Richard lingered behind. "There's something I've wanted to ask you," he said once we were alone. "Something I've wondered about for 3 years now." "What is it?" "That first day, when you found the garage empty and confronted me about selling Dad's Mustang, you seemed sad but not surprised, almost as if you'd been expecting it." He studied my face carefully. "Did you know? Even then, did you somehow anticipate what we would do?" I considered his question thoughtfully. The truth was complex but worth sharing. "Your father and I discussed many scenarios during his illness," I explained. "The Mustang was a test of sorts, a valuable but ultimately replaceable object with tremendous sentimental significance. We calculated that if you sold it without consulting me, other more serious financial exploitation would likely follow." Understanding dawned in his expression. "So, when I told you about the car, I knew the trust would likely be activated soon," I confirmed, though I still hoped I might be wrong about what would follow. He absorbed this with remarkable equanimity. "Dad really did think of everything." "Not everything," I corrected gently. "He never anticipated the foundation, or your transformation, or this new form of family we've created. He provided the conditions for possibility, but what emerged was beyond calculation." After Richard left, I returned to the garden, completing the circle of my day as the sun began its descent behind the mountains. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: legislative battles in 3 states, construction issues at our Colorado facility, the ongoing research at the Howard Warner Institute. But today, on this anniversary, I allowed myself to simply be present with how far we had all traveled from that rainy Tuesday when my children had left me behind. The journey had not been what any of us expected. Pain had led to purpose. Justice had evolved into healing. What had been broken had been rebuilt, not identically, but perhaps more strongly for having acknowledged the fractures. In my mathematician's mind, I calculated the probability of this outcome 3 years ago, less than 5%. Howard would have given it better odds, his optimism always balancing my pragmatism. As usual, his intuitive understanding of human potential had proven more accurate than my statistical analysis. As twilight descended over the desert, I whispered words meant only for him. "You were right, my love, as you so often were." The circle was complete, not ended, but transformed into a spiral that would continue evolving long after I, like Howard, had departed from it. The lesson, so painfully learned and taught, would endure through the Foundation's work, through changed lives and policies, through a fundamental shift in how society viewed its eldest members. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was legacy. Give me a score from 0 to 10 in the comments about what you thought of the story, and subscribe to the channel to get the best stories every day.
Trước khi khép lại câu chuyện này, mình muốn bạn ở lại với mình thêm một chút, như một cuộc trò chuyện thực sự, không vội vàng, không kịch bản. Đôi khi mình nghĩ điều đặc biệt nhất của những câu chuyện như thế này không phải là cao trào, không phải là cái kết, mà là những cảm xúc còn đọng lại sau khi mọi thứ đã kết thúc. Bạn có bao giờ xem xong một câu chuyện rồi tự nhiên im lặng vài giây không? Không phải vì không có gì để nói, mà là vì có quá nhiều thứ đang chạy trong đầu. Mình thì có. Và mỗi lần như vậy mình lại tự hỏi, ngoài kia có bao nhiêu câu chuyện giống như thế này mà chúng ta chưa từng được nghe. Bao nhiêu con người đã trải qua những điều khó khăn như vậy nhưng không có ai kể lại. Bao nhiêu người phụ nữ đã phải mạnh mẽ trong im lặng mà không ai thực sự nhìn thấy. Đó là điều khiến mình luôn suy nghĩ rất nhiều sau mỗi video. Bởi vì sự mạnh mẽ không phải lúc nào cũng ồn ào. Nó không phải lúc nào cũng là những khoảnh khắc đứng trên sân khấu hay những chiến thắng rõ ràng để mọi người vỗ tay. Đôi khi sự mạnh mẽ chỉ đơn giản là thức dậy vào mỗi buổi sáng khi bạn không còn chút năng lượng nào, tiếp tục cố gắng khi mọi thứ dường như đang chống đối lại bạn, mỉm cười dù bên trong bạn đang rất mệt mỏi. Và điều đặc biệt là rất nhiều người phụ nữ ngoài kia đang làm điều đó mỗi ngày. Không ai biết, không ai hỏi, nhưng họ vẫn tiếp tục. Những nhân vật trong câu chuyện bạn vừa xem có thể là hư cấu, nhưng cảm xúc của họ thì không hề hư cấu. Nỗi đau là sự thật, sự tổn thương là thật, và cả sự kiên cường cũng là thật. Đó là lý do tại sao mình luôn muốn kể những câu chuyện như thế này. Không phải để làm mọi thứ trở nên buồn hơn, mà để chúng ta có thể hiểu hơn, hiểu rằng đằng sau mỗi con người là cả một hành trình mà chúng ta không thể nhìn thấy. Hiểu rằng đôi khi sự im lặng của một người không phải là họ yếu đuối, mà là họ đã phải chịu đựng quá nhiều. Và hiểu rằng sự vươn lên không phải lúc nào cũng hoàn hảo. Có những lần họ sẽ gục ngã, có những lúc họ sẽ nghi ngờ chính mình, có những khoảnh khắc họ muốn từ bỏ tất cả. Nhưng rồi họ vẫn đứng dậy, không phải vì họ không sợ, mà là vì họ không còn lựa chọn nào khác ngoài việc phải tiếp tục. Và mình nghĩ đó mới là định nghĩa thực sự của sức mạnh. Không phải là không bao giờ yếu đuối, mà là vẫn bước tiếp, ngay cả khi bạn đang yếu đuối nhất. Có thể khi nghe đến đây, bạn sẽ thấy câu chuyện này không chỉ là về một nhân vật nữa, mà là về rất nhiều con người. Có thể là một người bạn của bạn, một người thân trong gia đình, hoặc thậm chí là chính bạn. Và nếu bạn từng trải qua những cảm xúc tương tự, thì mình muốn bạn biết một điều: bạn không hề đơn độc. Có thể câu chuyện của bạn chưa được kể, có thể không ai thực sự hiểu hết những gì bạn đã đi qua, nhưng điều đó không làm cho những gì bạn trải qua trở nên ít quan trọng hơn. Ngược lại, nó càng cho thấy bạn đã mạnh mẽ như thế nào để đi đến đây. Và đó cũng là lý do mình luôn hy vọng khi bạn xem được những video này, bạn không chỉ xem để giải trí, mà bạn sẽ cảm nhận, bạn sẽ dừng lại một chút để nghĩ, để nhìn mọi thứ chậm lại, để hiểu hơn về con người và về chính mình. Bởi vì đôi khi một câu chuyện có thể không thay đổi cả thế giới, nhưng nó có thể thay đổi cách bạn nhìn nhận về thế giới. Và như thế đã là rất đủ rồi. Nếu bạn đã đi cùng mình đến tận đây, thật sự mình rất trân trọng điều đó. Không phải ai cũng có đủ kiên nhẫn để lắng nghe đến tận giây phút cuối cùng. Và việc bạn vẫn ở đây có nghĩa là câu chuyện này đã chạm đến bạn, dù chỉ một chút. Nếu bạn muốn, bạn có thể tiếp tục đồng hành cùng mình trong những video tiếp theo. Vẫn sẽ là những câu chuyện như thế này. Những câu chuyện có thể sẽ khiến bạn suy nghĩ nhiều hơn, có thể khiến bạn cảm thấy nặng lòng, nhưng cũng có thể mang lại cho bạn một góc nhìn khác. Và trước khi kết thúc, mình chỉ muốn nói một điều thôi. Đôi khi cuộc sống sẽ không công bằng, đôi khi mọi thứ sẽ xảy ra theo cách mà bạn không thể kiểm soát. Nhưng điều bạn luôn có thể kiểm soát là việc bạn chọn đứng dậy như thế nào sau tất cả. Dù chậm cũng được, dù mệt cũng được, chỉ cần bạn vẫn bước tiếp thì bạn đã mạnh mẽ hơn bạn nghĩ rất nhiều rồi. Cảm ơn vì các bạn đã ở đây, đã lắng nghe và đã cùng mình đi qua những câu chuyện này. Hẹn gặp lại các bạn trong những câu chuyện tiếp theo. Bye!